So let's look at some code that's going to take input from a user using the prompt and do a little simple math on it and output the result to the console. So here I have 3 lines of code loading into JavaScript where I'm using the prompt to ask me for my age in years. And then I'm going to add 1 to my age. And the way I do this is to say age, which is the container variable that I have, gets equals or gets age plus 1. So this will have the effect of evaluating what's on the right-hand side, taking age plus 1, and assigning it to what's on the left, which is age. So I'm going to overwrite the value in age with the new value of age, which should be 1 greater. And then I'll use console.log to output the sentence, next year I will be, and I'm using the plus sign here as a concatenator to take these 2 strings and put them together into one longer string, as opposed to here where I'm using it to do mathematics. It's one of the things about the plus sign in JavaScript that it can be used both on numbers and on strings with different effect, which is part of what the topic of this video is. So here is my code, and let me make sure it's saved, and I'm going to switch back to the browser, and I'm just going to reload the page. Nothing appears on the HTML of the page. All this happens in JavaScript. And it's going to ask me what is my age in years, and I'm going to say 35 because everybody lies on the internet. Next year I will be 351. That's not what I'll bet you were expecting. So why is it 351? What exactly is going on here? Well, what's happening is that this is an artifact of JavaScript being a weakly typed language. And we mentioned in the text of the lesson this week the concept of type coercion. Basically, what's happening is that JavaScript, when it has variables that are different types, and it needs to do something to them, it will convert one type to another as it sees necessary in order to get the job done. So let's look at exactly what this means a little more. So one of the things that is very useful in JavaScript is an operator called type of. So if I use the type of operator and then pass it a value as a variable, it will tell me what type that is. Is it a string? Is it a Boolean? Is it a number? So by putting this in here and running this JavaScript again, we can actually see, this time I'll be 36. It still tells me that I'll be 361 next year. It's also showing me that the variable age is of type string. So you can see what's happening here is age here is of type string because prompt returns a string to your variable. I could have easily typed my name. I could type anything I want into that prompt. It didn't have to be a number. So JavaScript treats whatever comes back from prompt as a string. And when I go to add 1 to my string, JavaScript has 2 choices. It can either try to convert age to a number, or it has to try to convert 1 to a string so that it can add 2 things of the same type. And in this case, what it's doing is it's converting 1 to a string and adding it to 36 to get 361, which is clearly, pardon my clock, which is clearly not what we wanted to happen. So this will happen all the time in JavaScript. It will make these decisions on your behalf, and sometimes it'll be doing what you want, and sometimes it won't. So for example, let's look at kind of some crazy examples. If I just go in here and type at the JavaScript console, I can see the output of an expression that I type. If I say type of, I'll just use my name, it tells me that it's a string. If I say type of 35, it tells me that it's a number. So type of is a way to determine what the type of a variable or a value is that you pass. So because we can type here at the console and find out what's going on, we can do some interesting expressions. So for example, what if I took the string 35 and add to it, let's say a Boolean value like true? What do you think is going to happen? Well, what happens is the same thing that happened in our JavaScript when we added 1 to age. It takes the true and turns it into a string and then adds the 2 together. Now, interestingly, if I had said the number 35 plus true, now what do you think it's going to do? 36. It converted true to a number, so it would be the same type as the 35, And in this case, the number it decided true should be is 1, because at its most basic in computer code, 0 is false and 1 is true. And so that's what it's done here. The point of showing you this is that this can make you nuts very quickly when you're trying to do basic operations on variables and you're not getting the answer that you expect or the result that you expect. And it's often because of JavaScript's type coercion. Now, over time, you'll learn that you can take advantage of it, and it's kind of a feature, not a bug. But when it is a bug, then you need to do things to explicitly and put into your code what it is you'd like to have happen. So here's how we would do this in this particular case. I want to make sure that the age variable is treated like a number. Now there are two basic ways to do that in JavaScript. And for the purposes of this example, they're equivalent, although we'll see that there are some differences. One is that there's a global JavaScript function called parseInt. And what parseInt does is it tries to read the value of age, of the number that's passed into it, or I should say the string that's passed into it. It tries to read it at a string and figure out if it can convert it into a number in a logical way. So if we say age gets parseInt age, and then we again use the console.log, and I'm going to say now, after parseInt, if I do this and we rerun this code, let me clear the console, refresh, my age is 35. It says the variable age is of type string. After parseInt, the variable age is of type number, and next year I will be 36. This was the thing that we intended all along. And you can see that essentially what we've done is we've told JavaScript, no, this thing is a number. Try to convert it to a number, and now let's move on. Now there's one other way that we could do this, which is not parseInt, and it is to use a function called number. Now I'm not just getting these out of thin air. If you actually go and look at the JavaScript reference, the global JavaScript object reference here on W3 Schools, you can see that there are a bunch of things that are always available within JavaScript, including parseInt, parsefloat, number, string we'll look at in a moment. So there are a bunch of things and values that are available as well, and number is one of these, and what it does is it converts an object's value to a number the best it can. Now if I do number here, I save that and reload this page, reload this page, and we can see that after number, the variable age is of type number. So it seems like parseInt and number have basically done the same thing. And that's almost true. There are some differences. For a case like this, they're more or less the same. But just to get an idea of a difference, if I said parseInt true, I get a special value back from JavaScript, and this is an important one. It's NaN, which stands for not a number. And in this case, parseInt, its purpose is to convert strings to numbers. So what's really happening here is the Boolean value true is being converted to a string, the letters true, and then it's trying to convert that to a number, and no can do. Doesn't make any sense. On the other hand, if I said number true, it's actually accepting true as the Boolean value true and converting it to a number, which in this case is 1. If I were to say number false, as you might guess, it's going to come back with 0. So these are some of the things you have to take into account when you're converting variables from one type to another. Now, one thing that is that's sort of been right under our noses this whole time is the implicit type conversion that goes on that sometimes does exactly what we want it to do. Let's look at this line, this last line where it says, next year I will be, and then we're adding age to it. Well, on the previous line, we've gone through great pains to make sure that age is a number. And here, we're treating it like a string. So this is a case where JavaScript is seeing the number on the end of this console.log statement, and it's realizing it needs to be converted to a string in order for it to make sense, being added to the sentence, next year I will be. If we were to do this in an explicit way, it would look like this. We're basically using the string function, which is kind of the opposite of the number function that we see here. Number is used to convert an object's value to a number. And in this case, we're converting it to a string. So they're sort of doing and undoing each other. If we were to do this explicitly, it would look like this. So whenever you're not sure if you're going to get the result you want, or if you realize you're not getting the result you want, it's very likely that what you need to do is help JavaScript explicitly understand what it is you're expecting it to do with these variables and how you want them to be handled. And when in doubt, you can always use the type of operator, output it to the console, and you'll know immediately what sort of variable it is you're dealing with.